All right, guys, how's everybody doing? Sorry this is going up so late, but it was kind of a crazy weekend. Cameras. All right, so couple things. Reminder that you guys have the project due tomorrow, and try to get that done by the end of the day tomorrow. Remember, it's only going to help you guys with review. I'm going to turn off the light because it's really annoying. Let's see. Yeah, it's better now. You can see me. All right. Anyway, so what we're going to be doing today is yeah, you got that, and you got the textbook assignment that's due on Tuesday. Do the best you can with all the stuff that you got to do. All right, so this is going to be about a 10-minute video. All I'm going to do is go through some of the basics of the French Revolution. We've touched on a lot already this year, so we already went through the causes. So I wanted to show you guys this first slide, which is the 4 stages of the French Revolution. The first stage is called the moderate stage. That's the one we were discussing in class on Friday. And the reason why it's called moderate is like ordinary. It's like not extreme changes. And you can see up there, you have the meaning of the States General. You guys know this is where the National Assembly is created. This is where the storming of the Bastille occurs. This is where the Tennis Court Oath occurs. This is the development of a Constitution and Bill of Rights, which I'm going to show you in a minute. So this first stage of the French Revolution is a paper stage, right? It's some extreme stuff. Some stuff goes on, but it's a lot of like paper. And I'm going to come back to this slide a couple of times just as a reminder for all of us of what we kind of have to see. So that's the first thing that I want to talk to you guys about. So within this moderate stage, the first thing that's going to take place, what's going to happen is it's going to be a lot of legal stuff. So the first thing they're going to do is, as we saw with the Declaration of the Rights of Man, which I think is the next slide. Yeah. We talked about that a little bit. We're going to discuss it a little bit more on Friday on Monday rather, because I didn't get to it with a couple of my classes. The Declaration of the Rights of Man is just what a declaration would be. It's very similar to the Declaration of Independence. Thomas Jefferson helps to write it. It doesn't do anything except declare that these are the rights that all citizens have to have in France. And it's like the first stage of rebellion to declare this idea. So they're not declaring independence like they did in the American Revolution, but what they are doing is they're declaring these are the rights that every man must have, and they're all modeled off of John Locke's natural rights. So just keep that in mind, and that's an important idea. This is one of those documents that show up everywhere. Remember, it's modeled after the Enlightenment thoughts and the Enlightenment thinkers, the philosophers, and it's really going to kind of just begin and jump everything off. So one of the first things they do is the decree abolishing the feudal system. This is going to be made August 4th, 1789. When they say abolishing the feudal system in France, they're talking about getting rid of the estates. So in other words, making it so that the first, second, third estate no longer exists. So getting rid of those feudal privileges that we've discussed and those kinds of ideas. So whenever you talk about this, one of the first things they do is they make it so there's more equality within France. So just keep that in mind as we kind of go forward. So within this moderate stage, this is all the stuff that kind of goes on. I told you Declaration of the Rights of Man. They're also going to create a Constitution of 1791. Constitution of 1791, whenever you see the writing of a constitution, it's just talking about how the government's going to be organized. And of course, they're again going to model this after all of the Enlightenment philosophers. You're going to see a lot of Montesquieu here with the separation of powers. You can see it there, legislative, executive, judicial. I only showed you this little part because you don't really need to know that much about it, but you need to kind of have an understanding of what's going on. So again, this is paper. And just so that you're aware, the king is still hanging out. So this is not, the king is still around. So he's still hanging around. So they're not saying there's no more king. They're really in the first stage setting up France into a constitutional monarchy. So they're going very slow, right? First stage of the French Revolution is really, really slow. Then things kind of heat up. And one of the things that comes about during the first stage of the French Revolution is the Women's March on Versailles. And as you guys remember from class, hopefully you remember, one of the big things that happens is there was just not enough food. There was not enough anything. And as a result of that, the people that began to rebel actually were women who show up at Versailles and really demand that the king change things. And they're angry and they show up with their pitchforks and everything else. I don't want to say it's women activism, and feminism, because it's not. But it's definitely the first time that you're going to see women in a revolutionary movement that are going to really step up and say, we're the people that are making all the food. We're the ones that are doing all this. It's important for us to do it. In addition to this, and this is not something in your notes, and we might talk about it, I'm not sure tomorrow, but there's a woman named Olympia de Gouges. She is considered a philosopher, and she writes a document called the Declaration of the Rights of Women, which is, a counterpart to the Declaration of Rights of Man. But what it's basically doing is it's saying, like, these are the rights that women should have during the French Revolution. This is what we're fighting for. And it's really the only time that you see women included in Enlightenment philosophers and in the French Revolution. So I just want you guys to be aware of that. And it's something to kind of recognize. Now, what I want you to understand is that the French Revolution is not about women's rights. They don't really accomplish anything for women. In fact, when we get to Napoleon, when we talk about him a little bit more tomorrow in class, Napoleon takes everything away that women might have achieved. So, but I wanted to make sure you knew this image and what it was about. And we talked about Mary Wollstonecraft in class for a few minutes. Olympia de Gouges is another one of those first women activists that are kind of important to remember. All right. So what happens next is, the first stage of the French Revolution kind of comes to an end pretty abruptly in 1792. And it really comes to an end with the execution of Louis XVI. And what essentially happened was Louis XVI and Marie Antoinette, who was his wife, attempted to try to get people to help them from around Europe in terms of helping them kind of squash the revolution. And being that that would be like treason, and being that they try to flee the country as they try to get all these other monarchs from around Europe to help them out to squash the rebellion, they're eventually caught and they're going to be put on a quote-unquote trial, and they're going to be executed. And that's going to be where the radical stage of the French Revolution really begins. When we say radical is extremist, right? It's going to be like, this is going to be the violent part. This is where you see the guillotine. This is where you see the majority of people that are going to get killed are going to get killed. So between 1792 to 1794, after the execution of the king, things get crazy. Because there's people that want change. They want the revolution to move forward as quickly as they can. We saw this. Okay, we saw this. So this image here is one of those famous images of the execution of the king. And it kind of really shows what's going on in France at this point. And I want you to think about how significant this idea is. You have this king, Louis XVI, who's the end of the Bourbon family, who's now being executed. I mean, it's a huge change to what was going on before. And as a result, this is kind of a cool document. So if you guys want to pause the video at some point, definitely look at this because it's good for like a point of view kind of thing, but it's just another image that kind of shows this. All right, so I'm going to stop right there so you guys can all look at the blood dripping down. One of the things that happens as a result of the execution of King Louis XVI is that you have a split in France. You have people that are like, okay, the French Revolution has gone far enough. Like, now we're getting crazy. The king is dead. Let's just build on democracy. Let's kind of go through it. And there's another part, which are the Jacobins. And they're members of what's called the Convention. And the Jacobins and the Mountain, which is vocabulary you don't really need to know, they want the revolution to keep going forward. And the leader of this movement is a guy by the name of Maximilien Robespierre. He's a leader of what's called the Committee of Public Safety. And this is like a form of government that's associated with the French Revolution. That's the group that's in charge during this time between, the mid-1790s. So Robespierre is a guy who is misguided. In fact, we might look at a document about him tomorrow. But Robespierre is a guy who's kind of misguided. He wants a pure republic in France. He wants true democracy. And what he argues is that the best way to achieve democracy is you have to get rid of anybody who opposes him. A lot of times Robespierre is associated with Rousseau, one of those enlightened philosophers, because his idea is that it's almost like an ends justify the means. It's one of those deals where if anybody opposes the revolution, he argues that they need to be executed. And who could oppose the revolution? It could be the church, who says they want more power now that the king's gone. It could be the peasantry, who refuses to fight in wars that Maximilian's going to kind of organize. Is it going to be the city workers, who want higher wages? Any of those people that want more than what he says. He thinks the ends justify the means, and we need to get those people. We need to arrest them, and we need to execute them. And that's why this graph here is one of those ones that shows up all the time on the Regents, and it could show up on the AP. But the significance of this is that when you talk about the Reign of Terror and you talk about the killing of those tens of thousands of people in France, there is no discrimination when it comes to killing. There's a large number of peasants that are killed, which I know is kind of ironic, and the middle class is killed, and the city workers, and the clergy. Every single group is going to be killed during the Reign of Terror, because what Robespierre argues is that if you're not into this revolution, if you're not in it the way that you are, then you are not going along with the general will, and you are not obeying that social contract. And as a result of that, those people are going to get executed for their crimes, right? And what we would argue as crimes, or not argue, we would argue that they weren't crimes. Robespierre would absolutely say that these people need to be executed because they're going against the French Revolution. So this is the radical phase. This is where all of the real extreme stuff comes from. And when you see the videos and stuff, it says, so period of radical, it says execution of the king, Reign of Terror, Robespierre. And this stage is going to go on for about 2 years, and you're going to see the execution of all of these people, and they're all on the watch of Robespierre. And what eventually happens at the end of the Reign of Terror is obviously Robespierre is going to get executed, because people have had enough. Because even though he has an idea of democracy, and he has an idea of the revolution, the way that he goes about it is so extreme that it almost becomes counterproductive to what the revolution is. What ends up happening after the Reign of Terror is that you go into a conservative phase of the French Revolution. What that means is they kind of go back. It says a period of reaction against the violence of the revolution, establishment of the Directory. That's the conservative. Whenever they use the term conservative, which is what you're reading about in your homework that's due on Tuesday, conservative means kind of going backwards, and staying where you are. So the response to the Reign of Terror is this conservative phase of the revolution that is run by the Directory. And that's kind of how it goes. I'm going to talk a little bit more about this stuff tomorrow before we get to Napoleon, but I just wanted to kind of give you guys a heads up about what this whole thing with the revolution is coming from. It really goes in the stages. It goes in from moderate phase to a really, really crazy phase, and then moving forward to a conservative phase where it's backlash, and then a Napoleon's reign, which is what we'll get into. Oh, look, my wife's calling. All right, so I'm going to end it there, and I will see you guys tomorrow.